Welcome to the Trent England Show. It is day 8, so the school day 8 at least. Some people saying day 10 of the fake strike. It's a fake strike because, some people call it a strike in the media. Most people up here don't call it a strike, but it's not really a strike because schools are actually shut down. We always remind people of that at the beginning of every show. A lot fewer people up here, as far as we can tell, than there was on Monday, and even I think on Tuesday. I think Monday was the peak of the whole thing, really. Of course, last week it ebbed and flowed. The weather was a little different. You had more people inside the Capitol, fewer people congregating outside of the Capitol because it was cold. This week we've had more people outside the Capitol, and it's been a lot easier to get inside the Capitol. We did the show from in there yesterday. Where do things stand right now? We covered on Monday and Tuesday the fact that the OEA, Alicia Priest, on Friday said that all they cared about was getting the governor to veto the repeal. This is a little complicated, but to veto the repeal of the hotel-motel tax, right? The original package included the hotel-motel tax. Some legislators said that they would not support it unless there was a guarantee that that would be taken out, because there was a lot of concern in certain areas, particularly in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, where you've had a lot of investment in hotel construction, concern that if you bump up the cost of those hotel rooms, it's going to be harder to get convention business, going to be harder to fill those rooms. And so Alicia Priest was saying that she wanted the governor to veto that repeal so that that tax increase would still be in there, and pass capital gains. And Alicia Priest said, most controversially on Friday, that she didn't care where the revenue went. At least she wouldn't answer the question whether that revenue had to be earmarked to education or whether it could just be passed and go anywhere. She wouldn't answer that question on Friday. My interpretation is there's been some blowback because the OEA was out saying late yesterday that it's just $50 million more. If it gets to $50 million more, that meets their demands for the first year of funding. They actually need about $30 million more to make up for the revenue that was removed from the package that they passed a couple of weeks ago now, or a week and a half ago now. Of course, the hotel-motel tax that was taken out of that was about $50 million that was taken out of that package in terms of revenue to pay for the increased expenses, to pay for basically the education budget that the legislature passed. They have passed another $20 million. So the governor signed the hotel-motel repeal. She signed $20 million more, rounding all this, in revenue yesterday. The governor actually said, this is it. No more. She told the legislature that they should move on to other important topics like criminal justice reform. And the OEA, in response to all that, said, well, just give us $50 million more, the $30 million more to make up for what needs to be put in to fund the increased spending in the education budget that's already been passed, and then I guess $20 million more for whatever. I think they're still not specifying where that money would have to go. That's where things stand right now. The fact that nobody is talking about is that we have growth revenue coming into the state, and the OEA isn't talking about that, but frankly, a lot of legislators aren't even talking about the fact that look, revenues are coming in ahead of projections. We've only had 1 month in this current fiscal year when state revenues have not exceeded not just collections last year. They were already projected to do that. And of course, they write budgets based on projections, but the revenues that have come into the state have actually exceeded those projections, which means that the state of Oklahoma is sitting on more money than they have been spending, more money than what is in the current budget has been coming in, right? So the state is running a surplus right now, and of course, everybody wants to be conservative. Well, legislators want to be conservative with this. They don't want to get in another pinch. They don't want to allocate money, before they get to the final budget process. And of course, as soon as all this wraps up, the next thing for the legislature, aside from a few policy bills, finishing up some policy work, everything's going to shift to the budget. We're hearing rumors that the state budget is basically most of it is written. Of course, they've already written the education budget, so that takes out a really controversial piece of that. There are a lot of people expecting that the legislative session is actually going to end early, right? You might think, given everything that's going on right now, you might think, well, is this legislative session going to drag on beyond Memorial Day? It's supposed to end at the end of May. Actually, the whispers inside the building right now is just the opposite. That once this is over, this has sort of forced the legislature to address the education budget earlier than they would have, to address it separately from the rest of the budget. And the whisper is that they're gonna end early, and that they do have this growth revenue, which could, as they get to the final budget process, could make it a little bit easier. They also, are looking ahead to next year and expecting, and this hinges on natural gas prices, on oil prices especially, on other economic factors, but there's a lot of expectation that actually next year we could see this trend continue where state government is going to be bringing in more money than the budget that they're going to write, and that could give them some flexibility, especially when we get to this point next year, when we get to the legislative session next year. The other thing that's going on, obviously, we have filing for candidates. This is filing week for candidates who are going to be running in this year's elections. And so we are going to know by the end of the day on Friday, and we'll be talking about this next week, we're going to know how many legislators actually have challenges. Are they challenges in primaries? Are they challenges from the opposite party? Are there multiple filings? One of the things that we've talked about on the Trent England Show is we've seen a lot of liberal candidates filing for office, in some cases so many that a lot of the money that they're raising is going to be spent fighting each other in primaries, and there are questions about what that will then produce as those candidates move on to the general election. We've seen some real concerns from California Democrats. We talked about that on the show before. We will know how things shape up for Oklahoma and Oklahoma elections by the time we are doing the show next week and talking about this next week, so we'll be able to fill you in on all of that. Schools are starting to go back into session. Bartlesville is going to go back tomorrow. Luther is back today. That's probably why these crowds are smaller. We'll be covering this through the end of the week. Obviously, we're covering this every day, and we'll let you know what happens. My expectation is that basically this is going to wrap up by the end of the week. There's no place to go from here. Legislators are not going to they're not going to pass the repeal of the capital gains tax. That has as the conversations have gone on about that, people have come to understand just how terrible that policy would be. I'll just give you one little insight into that. You've got the liberal group up in Tulsa, OPI, Oklahoma Policy Institute. They've been pushing this line that, well, this affects a very small group of people. And I think they're now getting exposed. It affects a small group of people because a small group of people are selling their farms or selling their small businesses or selling their rental properties every year, right? Most of the time that's happening because people are they're making either a change in their business. Sorry, we're getting a lot of wind and dust blowing out here. They're making a change in their business. A lot of people do that when they retire. They do it exactly. If you're saving up for retirement, and you're saving rental houses, say, or you have a business, how many times are you going to sell that and take those capital gains earnings? That's going to happen exactly one time, right? So it's a small group of people at any given time, but it's not like you have rich people taking this year after year and it's just a small group of wealthy people. It's people who look very wealthy in one year because they're making that transition from working to retirement. Legislators have come to understand that as you talk to them in the building. I mean, this is where, your interaction with legislators and just the deliberative process is actually working out to protect us from some very bad policy and some of these lies that are told out there, or these lines that are fed to people that are very misleading about, a small group of wealthy people. I think that has been exposed. People are beginning to understand capital gains, that the law is going to stay as it is to the benefit of business owners, property owners in Oklahoma, keeping us competitive with Texas. And so there really isn't, other than maybe addressing growth revenue, maybe TSET reform. I mean, if the OEA wants $50 million, TSET reform is a good way to get that because they get about that amount of money from the tobacco settlement every year, and they have more money than they know what to do with. So there are plenty of options to get the legislature out of this at this point, now that OEA has said, $50 million somehow, and we'll go away. We're going to talk more about this, obviously, on the show tomorrow. If there are questions you want us to ask, I think we'll be back up here interviewing people tomorrow. I'm not going to do that today. We've talked to a lot of folks over the last couple of days. But if there are questions you want me to ask, post those in the comments on this video, and I'll ask those of the folks who are still here tomorrow. Thanks for watching the Trent England Show. Remember to subscribe on Facebook, YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, wherever you are. Find the whole archive of the show at ocpathink.org. And thank you so much for watching.